The 4 minutes Weber calculated become closer to 3. Macedonian companion cavalry crest the ridge above the supply route at a full gallop, moonlight catching on bronze cuirasses and lance points, and Weber understands with the flat clarity of a man who has run out of options that his raiding party will not walk away from this night intact. He gives the only order that makes sense, not retreat. The open ground behind them offers no cover a running man could reach before cavalry closes the distance. Form a firing line. Concentrate every rifle and the single machine gun his men carried on the raid into a killing zone the horses will have to cross. It is in its own brutal way the first moment in this entire war where German firepower meets Macedonian cavalry on ground that favors neither side by terrain alone, just numbers, discipline, and the seconds before contact. The machine gun opens up at 200 meters. Horses go down in the first 3 seconds, and the momentum of a cavalry charge in the dark, disrupted by the leading riders falling, becomes chaos rather than a controlled wall of lances. But there are simply more Macedonians than German bullets, and the ones who make it through the initial burst arrive with spears and swords into a firing line that was never built to survive close combat with cavalry at all. Weber goes down in the first exchange, a lance wound to the shoulder that will not kill him, but ends his ability to command. Of the 30 men who left the German perimeter 2 hours after midnight, 11 make it back through the gap in the encirclement before dawn. Hoffmann receives the surviving raiders at first light and understands, without needing anyone to explain it to him, that the war is over. Not because of the casualties. 19 dead or captured is a number his division could have absorbed in any conventional engagement of the war he came from. It is over because the raid was the last card left to play, and it failed completely. Ammunition reserves, already thin after 8 days of siege, are now critically low. Water rationing has reached the point where soldiers are measuring individual mouthfuls. And somewhere beyond the Macedonian lines, mounted scouts are almost certainly reporting the raid's failure directly to Alexander himself, along with everything it revealed about German capabilities, tactics, and desperation. Hoffmann does the one thing his training never prepared him for, and his instincts increasingly insist is the only rational choice remaining. He orders a white flag raised over the German perimeter at midday. Alexander receives the request for parley in person, riding forward with the same cavalry escort he used for his first reconnaissance of the German position 11 days earlier. Through a Persian interpreter fluent enough in the crude hand signals and pointing that has passed for cross-temporal communication throughout this siege, Hoffmann offers the only terms he believes Alexander might accept. Surrender of the division intact. In exchange, the lives of his 600 remaining men, and safe passage to withdraw from Persian territory entirely. Alexander's answer, when it comes through the interpreter, is not what Hoffmann expected. Alexander has no interest in 600 foreign soldiers withdrawing into territory he does not control, carrying weapons he does not yet understand, to some unknown fate beyond his reach. He offers different terms entirely, not withdrawal, but integration. The German soldiers will surrender their remaining weapons and ammunition. In exchange, they will be spared, fed, and settled as a distinct unit within his own army, their strange iron beasts studied by his engineers, their tactics absorbed by his own officers, their knowledge treated not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a resource too valuable to discard. Hoffmann understands, listening to the terms translated back to him, that he is being offered something between captivity and adoption. It is not the surrender he imagined making. It is the only surrender available that does not end with his division destroyed to the last man in a siege that has already proven, over 11 days, exactly who holds every advantage that matters. He accepts. The formal surrender takes place at dusk. 600 German soldiers lay down rifles they have carried since a war 18 centuries in their own future, watched by Macedonian soldiers who have spent 11 days learning to fear and then outthink the strange machines now sitting silent and permanently empty across the valley floor. Alexander's engineers spend the following weeks examining the abandoned tanks with the same methodical curiosity that has defined every stage of his response to this impossible war. They cannot replicate the engines. They cannot manufacture the fuel. But the guns, rifles, machine guns, the basic mechanical principles of cartridge ammunition, those Macedonian craftsmen begin to understand within months. History, the version that continues forward from this moment, will never fully record what happened to the 600 men of a German division that vanished from the Eastern Front in 1941 and never returned. Berlin will list them as missing, presumed lost to Soviet encirclement, in a war that continues without them exactly as it did in every version of history that does not include this impossible detour through ancient Persia. For Alexander, the encounter leaves something more lasting than 600 integrated soldiers and a handful of tanks that will eventually rust into curiosities his descendants will not know how to explain. It leaves a lesson he carries into every campaign that follows for the rest of his life, that the deciding factor in any war, ancient or impossibly future, is never simply the sophistication of the weapon. It is supply, patience, terrain, and the willingness to win slowly rather than lose quickly. Weber survives as wound. He spends the remaining decades of his unexpected life as an advisor to Macedonian military engineers, an old man by the time of Alexander's death, still unable to fully explain to anyone around him how he came to be teaching ancient soldiers principles of warfare that, in the world he came from, would not be formalized for another 2,000 years. The tanks themselves are eventually broken down for their metal, their true origin fading into a court legend about iron beasts that fell from a tear in the sky, a story that outlives every soldier who was actually there to see it happen, on both sides of a war that history was never supposed to record at all. What do you think? Did Alexander make the right call, or should he have destroyed the Germans entirely? Drop your thoughts below. Thanks for watching the full series. More alternate history is coming. Subscribe so you don't miss it.